Today is World Mental Health Day. So many people around the world are facing mental health concerns right now, but it's even more common among the men and women who protect and service every day. So federal data shows that 30% of first responders are dealing with some kind of mental health issue, compared to about 20% of the normal population. And about 3 in 4 police officers said they had experienced a traumatic event on the job. So here to talk more about mental health in police departments all across our country is Al Eskenazi, founder of the Community Police Relations Foundation. Al, thank you for joining us.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having us.
As we know, this is a huge issue. We know that children and teenagers are being diagnosed more and more with depression and anxiety. What does it mean for the kind of diagnoses that we're seeing when it comes to police departments?
Well, if you can imagine the trauma that a police officer sees throughout his week, month, year, and certainly throughout his career. These are people, first responders, firefighters, law enforcement officers. These are people who run toward the event, not away from the event. So just imagine there's a shooting or a fire. Everyone's running away, they're running toward. And that builds over time, that trauma. Perhaps you can imagine a real case that ensued several months back that I was involved in. 2:30 a.m. in the morning, a police officer gets a call, domestic violence call, and he's first on scene. No backup as yet. Goes in, subdues the subject, and on the floor lies a bleeding woman and a bleeding child. How, as a human being, are you not affected by that? And throughout an officer's career, this is ongoing. You know, these are people who, when called, they respond. They never ask race, creed, color, sexual orientation. They just respond to many unknown factors. It builds, the trauma builds in them over a career.
And that trauma many times turns into post-traumatic stress disorder, which again can then continue to more diagnoses as well. When it comes to the low retention rate that we're seeing with police departments, we're also seeing it more difficult to get new officers, including here in Albany and really across the United States. Is that low retention also causing more issues when it comes to mental health, Al?
Well, you know, I believe we have a societal obligation to support those that support us, and that's not what's happening in our current state of society for the last few years. So yes, you know, imagine you're the officer running toward the trouble, saving people, and all of a sudden you're the bad guy. I had one of my officers tell me, an officer tell me that 11:30 at night he calls me and says, "Hey Al, how come I served 4 years in the Marines. I went from the Marines right into law enforcement for 20 plus years, and my children are subject to bullying at school because their father's a law enforcement officer." So all this builds into the trauma. And, you know, as far as children go, there's not much positive news coming out for them to see regarding law enforcement. For instance, we do 3-4 events every week, and we never have media coverage of it. Our events are our officers at barbecues with us, handing out bicycles, handing out clothing, food drives, participating in basketball games, baseball games, and yet it goes uncovered. It's a very positive experience. And in my experience, I'm in some of the most difficult neighborhoods in the United States. And I find that people love the police. They're supportive of the police. It's not a true representation of neighborhood relationships with law enforcement. I find it's an insincere exposure, and I invite anyone who wants to go with me to some very, very difficult neighborhoods to see the true relationship of law enforcement and the community.
Well, I know.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I was just going to say that here in Albany, I know that the community interaction has been upped exponentially here, especially since the pandemic, with a lot of the backlash that you were talking about when it comes to police officers. So if it assures you at all, just last weekend, our news station was there for the annual 5K that the Albany Police Department does. But I want to mention that there has been a huge effort to have more community relations as well. Do you think that has improved things whatsoever? We know that suicides have gone down when it comes to law enforcement, or at least reported suicides over the past few years. This past year, we had 32 reported. In 2019, we saw 228. Do you think we're doing a better job of caring for police officers, or again, this is just going unreported, Al?
Well, I know that the command staff is doing a much better job in these last years and embracing law enforcement. And we don't like post-traumatic stress disorder. We partner with BoulderCrestFoundation.org, and they're a mental health program for veterans for 15 years. We've brought them into South Florida now. We have 37 different departments participating in the Struggle Well program. It teaches people of trauma to cope with the trauma and be able to turn a negative into a positive. We've established now, after 36 months of doing this, 6,000 officers have been through the program. Now we have a peer-to-peer program with Boulder Crest. That means at 2:30 a.m., that officer who just witnessed that horrible sight, he can pick up his phone, call a peer-to-peer, certified peer counselor to be with him within the hour. And so dealing with post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth at the time of the trauma. Yes, communities have been embracing law enforcement officers over these last 2 years better than ever before. And I can tell you that because the community leaders, community priests or pastors call me all the time to say, hey, when can we do another police event? So I know it's a positive environment.
Al, I'm really glad to hear that you guys are increasing your programming when it comes to preventing suicide. I want to mention your organization one more time, Community Police Relations Foundation, if people want to get a hold of you. I also just want to remind people that if they have thoughts of suicide or they need that help, they can always call 988 anytime. Al, again, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you giving us some real insight.
Thank you very much. Bye now.